What's up, guys? Got a new podcast for you with Aaron Clopton. He's currently the assistant coach at Indiana University for their softball program. Aaron has been in softball for a long time, but he's also had some jobs outside of softball, which is really cool. He's actually served in our military. He's done some things even in real estate. So he's someone who's really interesting, a really smart guy. Hope you enjoyed this one. Aaron Clopton, Indiana University. Make sure to subscribe. Hope you enjoy it. All right, Aaron, we are now recording live on the show. Appreciate you coming on today, man.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I spend all day talking about baseball and softball anyway, so might as well do it with you here, right?
Right, and now thousands of people can listen in on your own thoughts on the game. But I was reading up on you, man, and I tell you what, this is one of the reasons that I love doing this podcast, because I'll do a deep dive into each guest and their own background, because I'll know some stuff ahead of time before I invite them on the podcast, but I won't know everything until I do some research. And I feel like just doing research on you, it seems as if you've had about 10 lives of
Yeah.
your own life. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I spend day to day struggling to accomplish something, and then I look back and I think, you know what? I've done some things. I've in some regards, I feel like I've Forrest Gump to myself through life to some extent. Been super fortunate, and of all the things I've done, probably you get so set on trying to accomplish things. One thing I overlooked probably was how many lives I would get to touch or be touched by, and that's what certainly probably illustrates me most, is how many people I've been so fortunate to be come in contact with.
So I'm curious, take me through just a little bit of your journey. I usually don't actually ask guests this, but for you, it's an exception, because I'm just curious. Like, when you got done in college, how did you get to where you're at now? Did you envision you were going to be just a softball coach right out of college, or what was the vision you had for yourself?
Yeah, that's funny. What I really wanted to go was into comedy writing, and that didn't
Oh,
pan out. I didn't know how that would work out. But no,
did you ever try that?
off the books. When I first got to college, that's really what I really wanted to do. If not, my fallback was to be either a broadcaster or a coach. I loved coaching. My earliest days, even in Little League, I wanted to be a pitching coach. And ironically enough, many years later, I would become that in a context that I would have never dreamt would happen. But I loved coaching. For the longest time, I wanted to be Roy Williams, who was at Kansas at the time, right, and had retired from Carolina recently. Still a huge fan of all that he did and stood for. So coaching was always at the forefront of my thought. Went to school at University of Kansas, and by my second year, I tell people by accident, and I fell with softball, but I did. There was an advertisement for $10 an hour field work, and I thought, $10 an hour at the time was
That's good. Yeah.
that was easy cash. It was awesome, and so I go there, and as would become probably the norm for most of the things I've done in my life, I remember asking them, "Is there anything else that you have open? Is there anything else that I could help out with?" And that kind of opened the door to maybe the next 20 years of my life. I got to help out in a quasi manager role. I worked into what became what is now known as like a student manager, and then a graduate manager, and timing being everything. There was a coaching position opened up, and looking back, I think I had earned some of the respect, at least enough of a coach to get to make their radar, and there I was coaching. I was a pitching coach for the University of Kansas, and right out of college, and that kind of put everything else in motion for the rest of my life at that point.
What advice would you give yourself if you could go back to that first year of yourself coaching? Like, is there a certain thing that you did that you're like, man, I can't believe I did that? And if I could give this advice to any young coach, I would do it in a heartbeat.
You know what? The cool thing about time is that maybe only the important stuff arises, which means I know I made a ton of mistakes. I did, but I don't think about them too often, frankly. What I do remember, and I would say that I was pretty good at this, which is to never lean over my skis too far. I remember when, I was coaching at 21, and so there were girls that, frankly, I was hanging out with. The year before, and then all of a sudden I was coaching, which is not too uncommon from a lot of people today. And that's not even a sports specific thing, but I remember going in with the attitude of I'm not demanding respect, but I will ask for the opportunity to earn respect. And I never let that thought escape me in any day. And to that extent, I think that's still out there, that usually the people that demand respect are the ones that you're kind of loath to give it to. And so I attack every day with just trying to earn somebody's respect that day. And that has probably shaped me pretty well. Without a doubt, I would recommend that to anybody their first year. Just ask for the opportunity to earn respect, and then work hard to get it.
I like that. So after that, like I said, you've done a lot of things. So, I mean, you've served for our country, which I appreciate that. Thank you. That's
I appreciate that. Thank
incredible. You. And you're a professor. You've got like 9 degrees. I mean,
yeah.
what happened after that? So you were coaching at Kansas. You were pitching coach, 21 years old. What happened the years to follow?
Right. We had some good years. It was great. But I had said I wanted to be a coach, and then I met someone, a girl, right, that turns anything else. And that girl became my wife, and that was now 22, 23 years later. I remember saying, all right, no, I wanted the family thing. So, the family thing and the coaching thing necessarily go down the same path. But this came open, and the coaching opportunity came open. I thought, I can't say no, but I'll just do it until we start having a family, which was my intent. And ultimately that became the case. I coached there for my first 3 years, and then my oldest daughter was, we became pregnant with my oldest daughter, and then she was not that far away. And that's when I decided I was going to hang it up. This is another motif, me leaving coaching and then coaching pulling me back in. That's a common occurrence. And so then I step out, but probably another occurrence is struggling with finding an identity outside of coaching, leaving coaching, and for all those people who talk about, I didn't know what else I wanted to do. You hear athletes retiring and struggling with finding something else. That was definitely with me with coaching. Probably never found anything outside of that filled that bucket like coaching did. And so I did the natural thing, which is go back to graduate school. And I had always wanted to get a PhD. I thought, well, this would be the perfect time. I literally have no aim for applying it, but I'd like to get it. So I did that. And then, it kind of opened my eyes to the academic side of things. And then I pursued an academic career then at that point.
Yeah. I mean, and how long did that go for before you ended up actually getting back into coaching again?
A few months.
I thought you were going to say like 5 years.
Yeah. No, that took me to Marshall University, a place that I'm not sure I had heard of. Maybe I knew Randy Moss and Chad Pennington came from there, right. But I don't think I knew it was in West Virginia, frankly. But either way, went out there. Academically, that was my only spot when I got my PhD, applied for some jobs. And that ultimately was the only offer I got coming out. And so I took it, and a few months into it, I say a few, probably a couple, Shauna Stanton, probably another recurring motif in my life, had set up an amazing program that was there, and they had went from the MAC into the CUSA, and highly successful. I didn't know a ton about them though. They had a pitching coach leave mid-year, a really tough time to hire a good pitching coach. And I think I stopped by the office just to say hi, accidentally on the way home one time. I'm not even sure how that originally happened. And then at some point, Sean and I were talking about a opening that had come up, and now I'm coaching again, and I'm coaching again while trying to be a professor during the day. It was an incredible couple of years, frankly, in my life. I was wearing multiple hats, living multiple full-time positions, both at home and then in the classroom and then on the softball field. And Marshall was amazing. It was amazing couple of years that definitely altered the trajectory of my life for sure.
So I think that was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that 2008, right around 2008, I believe you were at Marshall. Now 2000, almost 23, you're pitching, you're still working with pitchers under Shonda, who's the head coach at Indiana. And just side note, I mean, she has so much energy just listening to her and watching her at the NFCA. That was incredible. But I mean, I met her. I'm sure she probably didn't even really remember me, but
she will. Yeah. Sean, I say this, I put her in the category of one of the highest compliments I give winners like her, which is she's not normal. They're not normal. I've been around a few not normal people, and they do amazing things. They change a lot of lives, and she's definitely one of them. What you see with her is authentic for sure, and authentic 24/7. Pretty amazing.
What are some of the things that are different now from a pitching development standpoint in 2023? Let's just say we're almost 2023 versus back in 2008 when you were at Marshall.
Oh yeah, science finally, for one, metrics. We have access to metrics, which is huge. And I say this for a lot. Like, there's a double-edged sword to all of that. There's no question. And I think some individuals maybe it's like when you're learning algebra and then calculus and even some high-level regression analyses and stats, right? That we have software to do all that. But to learn it, you've got to be able to learn it to do with pen and pencil and a calculator, and to do it in long form, and to fill up an entire chalkboard on one problem. You got to be able to do that before you can plug those in. And I do think we have some coaches coming out that can just kind of plug and chug, and they see these numbers and they've seen them on Twitter or a YouTube video, which honestly has amazing information, but they see it and then they kind of get beholden to these numbers, and they don't fully understand the framework under which they get these. And I do think that's an issue. That's an issue with some younger coaches. But a lot of today is driven certainly by more metrics, and for the whole, I do love that part.
Well, I think that gives somebody like yourself an advantage who was around before those metrics, and so you had to learn it without the help of technology and analytics and numbers. And so now, with you having a growth mindset plus having that experience, now you can combine, everything that you learned before you had it, and just all these numbers and technology is basically your assistant instead of you're its assistant with a lot of younger coaches.
That's a great point. Like to beholden to these numbers and working for these numbers as opposed to the numbers working for you. And you're right. I think that probably highlights that more than anything else.
Are there certain things that you see? And I know we'll eventually talk about, some recruiting stuff, because you're the perfect person to talk to since you have, 2 daughters who both play softball. But do you see from a development standpoint, high school kids, even younger, some things that you see that they're not doing that they need to be doing if they want to pitch at the college level? Maybe that's a generic question, but
no. I'm just processing through some of it. It's a great question. Athleticism is the first thing I go to. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to sit here and say multi-sport, even though that's awesome and that's ideal. I'm slow to throw that out there, just because I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy with a lot of camps in pushing for our words say multi-sport athletes, but our actions don't necessarily do that. So I'm not going to hold that to parents and club coaches and college coaches. I am going to say though that we've got to do more in terms of pushing athleticism and getting our athletes. And most of my time has always been, the last few years is I've kind of segued into my hitting position. I love hitting, but as you've mentioned, the first part of my career was all about pitching. Either way, so both of those being my main perspectives, the one thing we're all trying to do then is increase athleticism within those motions. And now we call it movement, right? Really focused on the movement aspect of things, but doing something to push and to increase and to heighten athleticism and the use of athleticism within those motions. A high school student would really, I say a high school student, certainly 12 and under 14 would be ideal, but yeah, you could do it 16 and 18 under, and being able to spend all your time moving and sprinting and exploding, and then being able to take that into the motion itself, but also like allowing yourself to do that. We are really, really not great as young instructors to develop a license to go crazy for these athletes, a license to live in a green light, if you will. And that could be for multiple reasons, but it's one of the biggest hurdles eventually from capping as a student athlete and not developing a strong enough of a green light to go push their athleticism into the motion.
So just basically over cueing them at a young age.
I think so. And honestly, I get it. Like it's easier, right? It's I always say like a lot of those, the vast majority of coaches, even still today, they coach what they see, and that's the easy thing to do. You do it as a parent or as a leader, as a sergeant of a platoon. You manage what you see, and the truth is, what you see is usually on a second or third order effect, right? There's usually something that underlies that. That's what you need to attack. And most of us struggle to be able to get into that. So we say this like coaches are parents have been trying to parent their teenagers for however many hundreds of years, right? And not understanding that generation before them, what they're talking about. They're trying to fix behavior, but what you really want to do is fix the cause of that behavior. That's on a macro level, all the way down to trying to get my kid to attack a low inside pitch and why they're not able to do that.
Let's talk about parents a little bit. You've coached in college, you've been in the private sector, you have two daughters, both play at a high level. One of your daughters is currently playing D1 softball. So you get it from literally every single, part of it. We had a conversation at the convention with a couple other coaches, and I was just listening to you talk to them. What are some of the things that parents need to maybe stop doing or start doing to help their daughter achieve whatever they want to achieve?
Right. Well, let me clarify a few things. Like when you say I get it from a different angle, like I've seen some stuff. That doesn't mean I get it, right? Like haven't solved anything. And the parent thing is really difficult in terms of like my most rational side, my most educated, experienced side can sometimes go by the wayside when it comes to my kid. Right? And I recognize that is the case with every parent that's out there. And I feel like I do a decent job of mitigating that. But I also understand like it's tough. It's tough. And as a parent, being able to keep a rational perspective on the growth and development and trajectory of their kid, it can be hard. It can be hard to maintain. It certainly be hard to maintain. That being said, I would love for parents to realize just how much power they have, and they need to exercise that power. That they need to continue to play a huge role, and not just necessarily driving them to practice and writing the check, even though that's an extremely important part of that experience. But to ask questions, and maybe that's just it, to not pursue any sort of their own agenda, but to be the ultimate supporter. And I don't mean like cheerleader. I don't mean like saying nice things or positive things all the time, but always being there, and sometimes pushing, sometimes pulling, but to never lose sight of the fact that that role is priceless. We'll have a lot of roles that are going to be necessary for a kid to go from 10 and under to 12 to 14, all the way up to Division I to beyond, wherever he or she wants to pursue. But that parent role may still be number one at the end of the day, and parents cannot abdicate that responsibility.
Yeah, you bring up some great points there. I don't have any kids myself, but I am, a son. And so I remember growing up, the only thing that, honestly, looking back, that I wanted to do, I just wanted to make my parents proud at the end of the day. Like if I played a game and I felt like my parents were proud of me, I felt really good. You know what I mean? Like, and I think at the end of the day, I think that's what most kids want. They just want their parents to be proud of them. And I know that sounds simple, but it's just
Corny or cliche.
it is, but it's the truth.
Like.
At least that's how I felt as a son. And so I think that's probably the case for other kids too. You mentioned something earlier about how you sometimes, you sometimes catch yourself because it is your own daughter. And that brings me to a point where my stepdad, for example, is in a nursing home now. And so there is a few different times where, the nurse would come in and she would start saying something that's been going on, and he'd be right there. And I would jump in to try to defend him right away. And so, and I caught myself, and it made me realize that's the exact same thing that a lot of parents do with their kids. And it's out of love, but I had to catch myself. And then the next time that happened, I had to make sure to not do anything. But so it's a little different, but it's the same thing too, where I think it's just something out of love, where you want to protect your loved one and jump in, even though it's not necessarily always your job, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And some of it gets into, not that I'm a huge Freudian, psychotherapy guy, but I also think there is some there in terms of what drives us. There's I forget the name of it, but they talk about doing like the 5 whys, and they'll ask you, what you're trying to do, and then you'll do it 5 different times. Why are you doing that? And then why are you doing that? And by the time you get to the 5th one, if you're not close to tears, and if you're not frankly talking about why, trying to fill a hole that started when you were 3 or 4 or 5, or connecting with your parents in a deeper way than you thought was possible, if you're not connected like that, you're somewhat inhuman or robotic, or maybe someone I quasi admire. But most of us have those holes that go back, and it's only 5 why questions away. And I think a lot of that, if we really look back, why are we so worried about where our kids are going, or how they're doing, or what's happening, or our parents towards the end? There's some sort of, maybe there's some self-preservation in terms of legacy. I think a psychologist would probably tell us some of that, but a lot of it is because we do have some identity wrapped up with them, and I think identity is a huge part. It was the basis of most of my research agenda. I see it every day, in how we live, that we're all driven by some level of social identity, and because of that, we don't make certain disconnect. What would otherwise be a very healthy thing, we don't make that disconnection. Because of that, then rationality sometimes can get tossed away, and because of that, then behaviors follow.
Aaron, if I went and watched one of your daughter's games, what would I see?
To be honest with you, you wouldn't see me. There's not just, because I'm not just a parent of a kid. I'm a pitcher's parent, and my guess is the only worst position to be in is a kicker's parent, and for a combination of 40 seconds out of the game, your life is rough. Same way with pitching. And my daughters have done a lot of really amazing things, and I think back to when the first one came through, and did some stuff that admittedly I would have never dreamt. I suppose I would. I remember telling her when she was maybe 4 or 5, before she even started the game, I remember telling her, like, you're going to have enough talent to do whatever you want in this game. And I really believed that. I could tell. Unfortunately, it takes more than just talent, but talent-wise, it was just fine. So it shouldn't have been too much of a surprise, but even at the highest of highs, I can't say I enjoyed it. And I don't see that maybe as a bad thing either, because I'm being a process guy. All I've ever wanted is the process and the workouts, the bullpens, the cages. That's my time. That's what I love. When it comes down to all the external stuff, it's not great. But I also identify with a lot of pitchers' parents, and you go to especially softball. You go to a softball game, really fast, you're going to find out who pitchers' parents are, and they're the ones walking the perimeter, or they're somewhere else in a parking lot, or because it's hard. It can be hard, and it shouldn't be, but it is. My wife's much better than I. But
Your wife's a former pitcher too.
she's a former pitcher, right? So she's been there. But it's tough. It's tough. I can't imagine being a kicker's parent though. Like that's rough. That's
That
gotta
would be
be.
tough. What do you prefer more, hitting or pitching?
Oh man. You know what? In an easier question, I'll tell you what I prefer for my kids. How's that?
Okay. Okay.
I'll rank them. No, I'm not going to rank my kids. Um, yeah, no, I certainly find, like, I definitely am a hitting instructor and a hitting coach with a pitcher mentality, if you will. Because I'm a huge attack guy, and I probably was never a full pitching guy. I was probably somewhat of a hitting mentality in the circle in terms of how we attack, and much like when I was a professor, I was probably more of a coach in the classroom than anything else. I was just never fully. I was always me, I suppose, and that's probably helped me and not helped me at some points. But this is probably a long way of trying to avoid the question of which one do I prefer, pitching or hitting. I love competing. I love competing, and whether it's a ball in your hand or a stick in your hand, just I don't care. Just give me whatever side I'm on, and then we're gonna go make your life really rough. And that's what I wake up thinking about, and that's what I go to bed thinking about.
Love that. I don't know if you were still around. You might have left this point, but I went and I watched Morgan Zirkle.
Yeah, sure. I was in the back. Yeah, I was
Okay,
there.
you're in the back. So I watched her presentation on. She did a lot of really good content. It was a great presentation on slapping,
Yeah.
and I wanted to hear your thoughts on slapping. Should that be something that coaches should be teaching players at a young age so they don't have to try to learn it when they're older? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the triple threat position it's what makes hitting on the left side more fun than almost anything else in most of sports, frankly. If you're not trying to do your best at developing that to whatever extent that hitter can do, you're missing an opportunity. Now, there are going to be some kids at some point. It's much like if I have some kid who's in the 95th percentile of height and weight as a 12-year-old in football, he's probably going to be on the line somewhere. But the truth is, until the game forces him to be a left tackle, let's have him run the ball a little bit. Let's have him throw. Let's have him maybe not run patterns, but let's definitely have him do all this stuff until the game says otherwise. And so some kids will not have the foot speed or the explosiveness to be able to do all three in terms of triple threat. But I think we cut them off too early. Much like when you look at the history of basketball, and the European game was so far ahead of forcing every position to play every position, right? So when Dirk Nowitzki comes over, and he's been doing point guard stuff, he's been passing and running the floor and seeing the floor, much different than our typical back to the basket type center, right? The same way with the triple threat, that there is room in everyone's game early on. But the problem is you've really got to understand it and to be able to teach it. Too many times we have some coaches who think they get it and then are all short game or all bunt or slap, soft slap, and others who maybe are all only one other aspect, maybe just hitting or power slap. But the truth is to understand it all. It takes a lot of teaching. But when you can get that as a lefty and the defense literally doesn't know how to play you, you've got, I mean, you've got everything you want, right?
Do you teach that at the
I don't
college level?
necessarily, no, I don't necessarily teach. And to some extent, I don't have to. When I'm here, Gabby Jenkins, our volunteer assistant, who was an amazing player here at IU, does a lot of that as well. Of course, Coach Stanton has, has a grasp of that side of the ball, maybe better than anybody else in the game today. And obviously, Morgan Zorkel that was her coach at Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And so they spend most of the time when it comes to slapping. So at that point, I become a student and I listen to and ask questions and kind of fall in line with what they're doing. But there's no question that if it's not in your lineup, it'll never be the biggest part, but there's a room in most lineups for that approach.
I was talking to somebody after her presentation who was there. He works. I'm not going to say that the name of the MLB organization just out of respect to him, but he was there because he wanted to see if potentially it could transition and work in baseball similar to an Ichiro type.
I understood why Ichiro didn't take, like why there weren't more Ichiros, and I'm afraid it's like Rick Barry in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
He led the NBA in free throw shooting those years, and he would throw it underhand, right, or granny style. Unfortunately, as we use labels as in a negative way in America, this granny style shot, but he could tell like it percentage wise, like that is your highest probable way of being able to hit these free throws. But there was such a negative connotation that went with that. He worked with Wilt Chamberlain. He got Wilt, some of Wilt's free throw years were abysmal, Shaq-like almost in some ways. But he was able to fix that. But Wilt, along with others who knew better in terms of they could use this approach, they decided not to because they just couldn't overcome it. And I'm afraid that to some extent, Ichiro's approach might fall in that category as well. Like we have some talented athletes on the baseball side that frankly could do some triple threading. I mean, you have a bigger infield, right? You can't tell me you can't put a soft slap down the line anywhere in the grass and get on first. And then they start coming in and then you power slap it into the gap. And then if they want to do all that, then you can hit away. You can do all three based upon the matchup. But I'm afraid culturally speaking, we struggle overcoming some of that.
So it's an ego thing.
I'm afraid it's an ego thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, when he first told me that, my first reaction, and I felt like one of those.
I'm not going to tell anybody. I won't tell anybody. Yeah.
My first reaction was, that's never going to work. And then on the flight home, I was just thinking about it more and more and more. It's like, man, it is interesting. The whole Ichiro thing. I've never really thought of it before. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why my initial reaction was, oh, that's never going to work in baseball.
Now, granted, Ichiro's an outlier and he's a super talent. Sure. But we have other guys that we could develop too.
Sure. Well, I mean, you got guys, for example, in the minor leagues who will never make it to the major leagues. And so why not? Why wouldn't you give it a shot? I mean, I don't know. That's something that I thought was interesting. I've been thinking a lot more about it and wanted to ask you about it.
I think the mobile quarterback would be another example of why it took so long is that we have a way of doing things in sport. We have a status quo. We have these default parameters that we resort to. Unfortunately, there's some pretty serious demographics that sometimes get tied up into that, right? So that's a limiter of some things. But when the NFL's mobile quarterback and how it's shifted over time has been one example of that. So I don't know, maybe slapping in baseball might be the last. No, the granny shot in the NBA will be the last thing.
Yeah, that's the granny shot.
But after that, Major League Baseball and slapping might be the.
I'm a little disappointed. I mean, I get taking away the shift, but that would have been perfect for guys when the shift was on to be able to implement that and just increase their OPS like crazy. But I guess we'll never see that.
Well, I love the fact that it forces you to just be better,
Yeah.
right? Just be better hitter or be better defender. I feel like one thing I can do is I see all these things like the long pants in baseball. Not a huge fan, but then I go back and I tell myself, if we had started that way, would I have an issue with it? If I had only known that, would I have an issue? No, I don't care. If much like in basketball, we can zone, we can man to man, we can pick up, we can have a half court trap, a full court. It's all in there. Why not shift in baseball? Why not move it around? Like if we had done that from the beginning, would we have such an issue? I
Mhm.
doubt it.
Right.
It's like
Totally.
anything else. Like I hate these basketball defenses that just put one foot in the lane and force the team to hit these shots. Well, I usually hate it because my team is not hitting outside shots,
Right.
and they're able to get away with it. So ultimately, that's the beauty of sport in all these sports is that all you're doing is just forcing the team to be better. What you're making them do.
I tell you what, softball coaches have it figured out more than baseball coaches when it comes to what they wear on a game day.
Oh
I
my
remember when I
gosh.
was coaching for the Orioles, I'm putting on pants, putting on a uniform. I'm thinking to myself, this is the stupidest thing in the world. I'm not playing. Why am I putting on uniform?
Well, and
Oh, I
Patrick,
have
why
figured
though?
out.
You're doing it because
Yep.
we've always done that way. Yeah, right. Although I shouldn't say we haven't always done it. John McGraw and like early managers were wearing suits and those thick looking flannel sport coats, and now that looked rough. Yeah, it's just like with college basketball coaches today. Every game, I tell my wife like these guys look so much happier dressing in this comfortable clothing. They look so much different. Yeah, well, overcoming a lot of that is it's yet another metaphor for all the things in our game that we've done because we've always done them, not because they have practicality or any purpose. I
100%.
assume at one point there was more manager players, like a Pete Rose or somebody early on, and they needed to maybe step in, and that became a natural extension. But not
Aaron, when you're out, I got a question. I want to pick your brain a little bit on the recruiting side. I've been on Facebook. I've been on some Facebook groups lately. I've been getting crushed and destroyed in some of these Facebook groups by some of these old people. What are your when you go out and watch games? Are you picking out like a couple of players that you're going to go watch and see? Are you just picking out a team? And then once you get there, what specifically are you looking for? Is it the eye test first of all?
Yeah, like you could start with the eye test and work down from there, frankly. If that was your main approach, it wouldn't be bad. I think for me and for a lot of us, we start where the pitchers are, right? And so if you just use that and then go where it takes you, you're probably pretty good there. So frankly, we go where stud pitchers are, and then you have teams that you follow, teams that you trust, coaches that you trust, the people that they're bringing on. You start there, and then all of that is a starting point, and then you go from there from what you see, the way kids run. I've said, where did we see this early at another tournament? Someone was talking about, it was like at a combine, and they put their team and their program and another program through a bunch of, it was like a showcase workout, and they put them through all these defensive things. And I think they could have probably boiled that down to maybe 3 minutes, and we could, with a 90% accuracy, tell you just by the way the kids play catch within the first 3 minutes what we're going to see from them. Playing catch, running, and then swinging the bat, and the way that they play in the field with range and glove dexterity, then that would come into play. But the truth is, if you can the way you throw a ball and the way you run, that's going to tell me a ton. If you look good in a uniform, if you look the part, that there's something to that, unfortunately, as well too.
So is there times when you go and watch a player and you just watch them throw, warm up, run a couple sprints, and just think, yeah, this isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and you can be wrong, right? You can definitely be wrong. But the fact of the matter is, that is the thing. It's also why, like, we have to be careful. Like, we make sure that you never cross somebody off on the first time, right? They have to prove that they need to be crossed off. You can get added easily, and I like to think it's easier. It's easy to add a kid to the radar, um, and to do that at an easier on an easier level than it is to cross them off, because you can't afford to overlook anybody. So you
How
got to
many
make
times
sure.
has your initial gut reaction been wrong?
Not terribly often.
Yeah.
Not terribly often. And it's not, most of these vast successes of coaches, much like the big fortunes in business, it's not because they were doing something that nobody else was. It's just that they went after somebody that everybody else went after, and they worked hard, and they connected with the kid, and just recruited the heck out of him, and won that game. So yeah, there's no question that you can win some battles. You can earn some money on having an eye for a diamond in the rough than everybody else does. But the vast majority of it is you're going to go after kids that most everybody else is going after, and you got to
Sure,
win.
especially at a Power Five school like you're at
Yeah,
right now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think about some of the showcases, the metrics on the baseball side? They have PBR, which is huge, plus perfect game. And I know, for example, like if I text a coach saying, "Hey, you should look at this guy," the first thing they're going to do is look him up on PBR and see all their numbers and video and everything. Do you foresee something like that happening on the softball side? And if so, would you want that? Would it be helpful to you?
Yeah, we'll take everything. Every coach would say that we'll take everything. And softball does have some stuff. I don't know if it's specific to softball necessarily, but recruiting services that do capture video, that do capture the most up-to-date metrics that are part of that. And there's no question that's a thing. But I mean, we put kids on a list based upon a Twitter that we saw on social media.
Oh, so Twitter's a big one for you.
It's a thing. It's all a thing, right? We're not going to leave any stone unturned. And so if that's out there and we come across it, definitely. Now, you could argue that there's a case of easy come, easy go. So the easier you get on a list, if you don't produce quickly, it might be just as easy to get off. But the truth is, you can still get on with. We're like I said, everyone's going to be super comprehensive in the stones that they overturn to find that next recruit.
So when you say get on a list, you see somebody you like, you put them on your list, and then next season you're going to go watch them play at some point.
Or that next weekend, yeah,
Right? Yeah.
exactly right.
And then if you like them enough, this is one of the things that I think I've learned in softball. If you like them enough, you invite them to your camp after their junior year, September 1st, their junior year.
No, the NCAA does allow us to invite to have no official communication in terms of that's tailored to them, but you can send them out camp related information or questionnaires. Just staying in touch with them, but you can't tailor your message to them until after September 1. That's when it really changes. But yeah, there is a way to generically stay in touch with some of these athletes. And if there wasn't, there's always the club coach that you can go through. So
how many of your players went to one of Indiana's camps and that are now there?
That's a good question. I couldn't answer that having not been here.
I know you're
certainly, yeah, right. I know a few, and I know that will continue to be the case for sure.
Last thing I just wanted to pick your brain about is the development side. Like, for example, this past fall, like fall ball is a big time for development. What's a typical fall like at Indiana? Like I know this is your first year, but like, what were some of the things that people would have seen had they been there from a development standpoint?
Yeah, there's going to be several similarities across all NCAA Division I programs, right? Because you have a X number of amount of days you can spend as a team, right? And doing your 20 hours, you can get your 20 hours in, versus the out of season type individual approach, and then you're much more restricted on the amount of time you can have together. And so for us, several of us northern schools, we do a lot of our team stuff earlier than would say if I was at LSU or Texas A&M or somewhere in the South. I would do that later on. I would maybe use up most of my fall to do individual to set the base and then go then do teamwork and finish with that. The teamwork is where you see the fall scrimmages. We do several inter squads. We can measure a lot. We can examine a lot. So we probably do a few extra inter squad scrimmages than others, but we still have out of competition, or off campus competition that exists there. So we have local schools that come in and play, or we took a road trip to Louisville and played a doubleheader at Louisville, and that ended our fall for us. But the rest of the way, we spend the first couple of weeks of getting every metric that you can come up with put in place. Some of it's a pre-test, if you will, for the fall being the test, and then we'll post-test them before they leave. Some of it's to see what was retrained from the previous years, so we could, a huge thing that we do here is coach them where they're at. Right, you've got to be able to coach them where they're at, and it's difficult to do that if you don't have that baseline. So we really invest a lot of time and resources in establishing that the first couple of weeks of when they get here, and then we have a pretty organized daily agenda that we're carrying out. So it's a comprehensive development plan that these athletes are going to get when they get here throughout the fall, and they leave here with one of the most comprehensive on paper development plans. They each get a player development plan that they walk out of here that basically comprises every metric that we've had from them, and it's it's a one, sometimes two sheets illustration of where they stand and what they need to do to get to where they want to go. So we blast and Rapsodo. We do a lot of K-Vest. We have all that in there. We bring outside consults in to be able to help us with some of the hitting metrics and hitting development that we want to do. So yeah, it's a full scale. It's a busy fall that goes by really, really fast.
Do you think the players really understand what those metrics mean?
Yeah, really good question. Not nearly as much as we want. One thing that I think we do really well here, Coach Stanton, I know put this in a while ago in terms of make sure that we take advantage of classroom sessions, and we're watching blast related videos. We're watching on base U related videos to understand swing inhibitors, swing sessions, aspects of the swing, so that when we say these words, it means something, and then even better, at some point, not just means something, but means something personally to every hitter. So I think our hitters they're growing all the time in that area. We have several that are amazing at asking questions, and I love that. So they're all kind of on their own personal journey to understanding that aspect of the game. And I'm really excited to see that pay off down the road.
Do you keep track of each player and how they learn best?
Not as formally as I think I would like to, because it's hard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the personality assessments, but I think the disc assessment.
I guess what I meant, I didn't mean like it's like personality. So I'll give you an example. When I was back with the Orioles, I would send these guys a questionnaire, and it was more like just random stuff. Like what would you be doing if you weren't playing baseball? And like, for example, one of the guys said, I would want to be in the Army. And so I took that, and when he started struggling, he would be tentative at the plate. I would always use like war battle analogies for him to be able to quickly understand it just based off of the questionnaire.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we certainly do informal stuff like that. There's enough non-softball, non-competitive related questionnaires that we give to them throughout the year, and that kind of maybe pulls the curtain back a little bit into what guides them, and we definitely have impacted that. I feel like we do a pretty decent job of conferring after workouts, us as coaches, talking about what all's going on and different ways that we would go about implementing certain things with athletes. And I think that's become a big part of it. Again, coaching where they're at is a huge go-to, and that's not just physical swing, but their mentality, where they come from culturally speaking, or whether they want Army or French chef type coaches, they're going to get it.
I got one last question for you. I'll give my answer first. So my question is going to be, what's one thing you want to improve upon as a coach? And I'll give some, what I would want to improve upon me personally is I want to be able to help players faster. I usually end up being able to get to where I want to get to with them and find the root cause, but I want to be able to do it at a much faster rate. What's something that you want to improve upon as a coach?
It might be magic words. Everybody has them, and we get stuck on the mechanical part. So and of course we've shifted over time. Throwing your hands, keep your hands inside, keep your hands high. Not saying the word hands at all, right? Use your backside or drive, whatever it is. Understanding the perfect word for every hitter, and I do believe if it's not perfect, there's a lot of really good, strong words that exist specifically for each athlete, and then to understand that. But again, that's you really got to see not just the swing, but the person underneath the swing, and that's I think a challenge for a lot of us. But that's probably the first thing I would go to is, man, if I could be given the gift of everybody's magic word or two, I'd feel pretty good about where I could go from there.
I like that. Have you ever read Nick Winkelman's book?
Yes, because I
like
of course heard him on a podcast somewhere, and he was great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Aaron, I appreciate you coming on today, man. We've almost been going an hour, which is crazy. Just been flying by, but it's been awesome. I appreciate you coming on. I want to come watch you guys play at some point this year, which will be a ton of fun. And man, I'm glad we got to connect.
Yeah, well, you'll definitely need to. We play here in Andy Moore Field in Bloomington, and there's not a ton of better places to play college softball. We have great fans that come out and take a look. It's an honor to be here as well. I know how many incredible guests that have been here. Some of this takes me back to, I was probably listening to you have to be in season 1 or 2 as you're cranking these out, and I think back to my time being deployed. And there were moments you're in some precarious situations, doing some pretty surreal stuff, but there's always this dichotomy of an existence there. One of which being that you usually have your phone with you, right? And my phone was always downloaded with podcasts. So if I had downtime in between the stuff that we were doing, I'm checking in on stuff that's going on. And the things I was bound and determined to once I got back, to get back into getting back into coaching again. And Patrick Jones baseball was always, I was always in the desert, doing some crazy stuff, and yet Patrick Jones baseball was still coming through there. So yeah, you've been there for me, Patrick. I appreciate that. So being on here is an honor.
No, I thank you more for your service. I mean, I'm just sitting down interviewing smart people, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, you had some amazing guests, and it's an incredible honor to be one of them.
For sure.